Hello, Blazor fans. Welcome to the Blazor Power Hour. It is the final Blazor Power Hour of the season. We've been building a dashboard for a solar panel array, which is actually a real working solar panel array at Lance's home. So special thanks to Lance for lending his solar panels and his skills for the show this summer.
Looking forward to this last part where we dive into the CI/CD things. As developers, we focus on the code the whole time, and then you get to the point that you need to do something with it. You can be lost if you're not used to it. So we'll cover that today.
That's definitely where I fit in this equation. Like, I am not the deploy guy. I'm the write the code guy. Like, I will write the back end code. I will write the front end code. I'll make sure it works on my machine. It's your job to ship it.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch Lance explain how this works as well.
So we've got Lance's screen up today, and Lance will be taking us through some of the ins and outs of deploying via GitHub.
Just to take a step back, we have this project, this source code, and we have it on GitHub. Most people treat that as just a Git repository, but there are some cool features that GitHub gives you for free. And the only limitation usually on a free account versus an enterprise one is how many minutes you can use. But you can compile your code in GitHub's cloud on all their virtual machines and spend that money and time that they give you and compile your code into whatever you need it to do. These are called GitHub actions. And those actions are defined by a YAML file. And that's what we're looking at now. And these YAML files are called workflows. So you can have one YAML file that maybe just builds the code like a smoke test, make sure that it compiles. Everyone who commits or opens a PR, this smoke test will just run, make sure there's no compilation errors. You can also have one that actually compiles the app in release mode, right? And you can code sign it, and you can upload it to GitHub. You can publish it to a store or publish to the cloud. You can do basically anything you want in here that you do locally. That's kind of what we're looking at now.
Can I mine Bitcoin?
They're catching on to that. It was a problem for a while, though. Yep. Because these are just PowerShell or Bash scripts. So each one of these steps are essentially where you see the little dash. This is just a command that is running on a shell, or you're using someone else's action, which is their command. Like you can write, let's say you wanted to enumerate over a list of files in a directory. You could do it here, right? It's just a regular PowerShell script. Or let's say you wanted an action that just does it for you. You'd write all the PowerShell script, publish it to GitHub Actions, and then someone can use that, and you just do it here. For example, you can see one that says uses Lance McCarthy, a keyless actions. This just gets some passwords, right? Instead of me putting passwords here, we have this backend system called a keyless. It's a service, and it lets us have secrets up there, and everyone can share those secrets. But instead of everyone trying to rewrite all the code that I wrote that connects to the a keyless REST API and authenticates with it and then gets the secret and all that stuff, I've done that and wrapped it up in an action. And the way you use it just uses the action name.
Because we don't want to share our Lance coin wallet.
Exactly. Right. You need to have the right ID. You might be saying, why is that ID in plain text? Because it's not a secret. A keyless uses the JWT token from GitHub and knows which repository is asking for it. So it's kind of cool. We don't need any passwords or secrets. So if I scroll up a little bit, though, you might say, what was this stuff at the beginning? This just says, when does this workflow run? When should it be triggered? This first option is just a button in the UI on GitHub. We'll see that later. And it will also run if I push to master there are changes to these files there. So that way this doesn't run if I change the README, for example, or if I change the license or anything that's not code related. So it only runs when there are changes in the code, or if I change the workflow. Permissions are this usually you don't need any permissions, but I need them here because we're using a keyless. I just have some environment variables so that I don't have to keep typing out this huge name every single time, or if there's a value that you're using frequently in multiple steps, instead of typing it out every time and risking a typo, it's good to set it as a var. And now we have a list of jobs. So if I collapse this, we're looking at the main workflow that I have. This isn't the one that publishes. We'll switch over to that once you understand what this does. I just called the job build Windows. We're just building it on Windows, no publishing, no deployment, no nothing. And all I do is we check out the code. We install the SDK. You can choose which .NET SDK because you might be wondering, this isn't your computer. How do you know which SDKs are installed? Then I just get my NuGet key. This is the only reason I'm using this here is because I want to connect to the Telerik private NuGet server, and I need a password or a key for that. That's all this step does. The very next step, I use that password and I add the Telerik NuGet source to the global NuGet config on this machine. And this is a command, just .NET NuGet add source PowerShell. Nothing special here. And I use that password from the previous step there. Next step is simply we just get all the NuGet packages for the project. We restore everything. It'll restore it from Telerik's NuGet server and NuGet.org. And then we build it. If you notice, I have no restore here. That saves a little bit of processing time because .NET will restore by default. And the RID, which is Windows. That was just a very quick job, right? So all we really see here is basically we're just doing an F5 in GitHub Actions. But what if we want to actually create an assembly, or we want to create a website or a package? Like most ASP.NET apps will do this like output folder, right? And you use that output folder in IIS, or you use it for on a Linux container. And up until I think .NET 7, you kind of had to use a Docker file. You needed a Docker file, and then you build that Docker file, which will compile the app in Linux. You get a Linux assembly, and then you create a Docker image around that. But the .NET SDK has built in now, and it's pretty cool. Don't need a Docker file. You can basically do it on the same .NET publish command. Since I've already explained what these do in the last one, you'll notice this time that I don't trigger this based on a commit or a push. We just manually trigger it in the GitHub UI, and we'll have Ed do that momentarily. I needed some permissions here because we are publishing the image to, excuse me, we're publishing something to the GitHub packages, right? So you need permissions to do that. You need to be able to say that this has permissions to write to our GitHub repository and the images. Some environment variables, these will change depending on where your thing is, right? There's the base image for the app, which Microsoft conveniently gives us. We have all of the prerequisites and the dependencies you need to run an ASP.NET app, and we just use that as our base Docker image. When we're done building the app, we're publishing to GitHub Container Registry. That's what GHCR means. The container repository is basically it means the name of the image and the repo that it belongs to, kind of like a folder, and then in that folder the name of the image. Because this is Ed's GitHub account, it's going to be in his repository, and the name of the container is Power Production. And just like in the other workflow, we have the name of the project, so I don't have to keep typing it over and over and risking a typo. All right, now it's time to get busy, right? The cool thing about jobs is you saw in that last one, we only built once. We had one job and it just builds on Windows. Right? It just quick build. But in this one, maybe I want more than one job. I'm going to collapse them at the top level so you can see them at a higher viewpoint. Let's see if all this fits. Oop, one job. Don't we want to go to that one? Let's see if we can fit all of them together. Yeah, we can. Excellent. So these jobs will happen in order. They are on the page usually, or they'll run consecutively if it's in a matrix. But what you can do is you can tell your action to say, do this job, and this other job needs the result of job one. And then you can say, on job three, you can say job three needs the result of job two. It's kind of what we're doing here. I have three different jobs. We have a job that builds the container as x64. So it runs on regular AMD 64 processors. And then we also have a job that I want to allow people that have like Mac M2s or you have a Windows on ARM chip. This will work natively on those two. You used to be able to do, if you're doing a Docker file, you can do them all at the same time, but the .NET SDK doesn't currently support a combined manifest where you have multi-targeted. So you build them separately and you combine them after. And that's what I do in this last step. We combine both of the x64 and ARM64 into a single container and we publish it. Finally, at the bottom, the random guy on the side is to build it Windows, just like the other one. Because what if you don't want a container? So let's say you're not using Docker, you're not using Linux, you have IIS and a Windows server. We do a typical build for Windows. So that's our high level. We'll only go through the x64 one because the ARM64 is identical, except we changed the target. This is a little complicated to go into here, but basically I'm saying when this is done, we have a particular tag for the image. And the tag is just latest or in the target name. So it'll be like, what's the name of it again? It'll be Power Production x64 latest. And that's kind of what the tag means for containers. Just like you saw before, we are checking out the code. Just takes the repo, downloads it to the virtual machine. Then I log into the container registry using these secrets. And you might be wondering, like, where does the GitHub token and the GitHub actor come from? I didn't define them above. They are implicitly provided to you in the workflow if you have defined these kinds of permissions, right? So if we do the packages, we know we have the permissions to do that. And we can get those values. And identical to the other ones, we're just getting the NuGet server password. We add the Telerik package to the sources. We restore it. And now we do the .NET build command. It looks pretty crazy, but it's basically just combining everything together. We're doing .NET publish, the project name. We're publishing a Linux container, a Docker container. The profile is the default container profile, which is already there. And here's the architecture. This is where we set x64 or ARM64. And we have the container image tag, which is the thing that goes on the end of it. And then the repository, the registry, and the base image, and no restore. This is like any other .NET build. You just get a container image out at the end of it.
Lance, in the NuGet package section, we have a step for the Telerik NuGet packages. Is that specifically for our packages because they require authentication? And what would you normally do just for the run-of-the-mill NuGet packages from NuGet.org?
If you had no Telerik packages, you could omit these two steps. Like we don't need to add NuGet.telerik.com and we don't need a password for it. So you just go straight to .NET Restore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just double checking there because our stuff is behind our own NuGet server, so you have to authenticate to get into it. I think that's something that we see for like support requests a lot is like, how do you do this step? Which it's in our documentation, but
Yeah.
it's still something you don't normally need to do with like the standard NuGet packages off the shelf.
It also trips you up. Like if you're building your code locally, you have the Telerik NuGet server in your local package sources. But then when you put the source code up to GitHub, it doesn't know what your package sources are locally. So it only tries to use NuGet.org, and then it fails. And build ARM64 is identical. So after we do that, we have these two different images, and let's combine them into one and publish it to GitHub Container Registry. This stuff is just making sure that the previous two jobs passed, like they didn't fail, because why try to do this if we don't have the results of the previous one? And here's what I meant earlier, that this job needs both the two previous ones together and the outputs of those. We'll have a visual representation of this on GitHub shortly. Again, we're checking out the code. We're logging into GitHub Container Registry. And the trick here is just a Docker command. It creates a manifest. We use the GitHub the container URI. Then we use the name of the repository and the latest tag. This means they can always get the latest build by just using latest. But if you wanted a specific version, you could just use x86 or just use ARM. But Docker is smart enough to know what your platform you're running on and whether there is an image that supports it in there. And we just push it up to the we push the manifest to the GitHub Container Registry. That is the Docker stuff. Now for Windows, right? If you're doing TIIS, the same thing as we did before, except we're creating a web package. Right? So when you do a .NET publish, it does the same thing. Check out the code, install the SDK, add the Telerik NuGet server, restore the NuGet packages, and now we build the project. We don't need to call .NET build because .NET publish automatically builds it. In fact, I didn't even need the release configuration because .NET Publish uses release by default in .NET 8. But basically, we were telling it what is the target runtime, which is Windows 10 x86. And here's the important part. Where are we publishing the final app, right? Where does it go? I'm just telling it to publish it to a folder called My App. So everything inside there will be the final app. Finally, we take that published stuff, right? Everything that was in my app, and I'm uploading it to the GitHub run. So there will be a zip file attached to the GitHub action with the entire app in it. You can just download and run it. All right.
How does one debug something like this?
That is the biggest headache there is with this. You basically run it. If it fails, which it will, I guarantee you, don't get frustrated. Even with years of experience in doing this, I usually get 1, 2, or 3 things wrong. I'm like, okay, that's the error. Go in and fix it. Push it again. One other little error. Okay, go in and fix it. It's kind of like programming by string.
It's got here debugging.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Is there ways to put in console log type messages to kind of flag those things, like write out environment variables, echo them in case you typed something wrong?
So for example, you can echo.
Okay, there we
go. These are essentially mini PowerShell commands, right?
Okay.
Each one is like a new line in a PowerShell shell.
So any type of bash type command should work here.
Yeah. I'm using bash, but I use PowerShell in many other places too. This is a PowerShell command.
Okay.
You can define it too. Let's say if I wanted it to make sure it's PowerShell, by default it's PowerShell on Windows. But let's say I'm on Windows and I want to use bash instead, I just do that. Use the bash shell. If I want PowerShell, it's like that. But if conceptually, each one of these dashes will launch a new PowerShell window. Like let's say you're doing this manually, open a new PowerShell window and run that command. You close that and open a new PowerShell and run that command. In the old days, they used to use the same shell and run each command consecutively, but a threat actor found a way to abuse that by getting like environment variables from a previous step that you didn't want to be available. So now each one runs separately. And if you want an environment variable to be available to multiple steps, you define it at the entire job level, or you make it an output of that step. But these are isolated commands for the best security, but they're all on the same virtual machine. So anything you did in a previous step, like create files, those files will still be there for the next step. Any other questions? Because before we switch over to github.com.
And for those who have not worked with the YAML, white space matters. This is very white
so let's
space.
use the let me find one that has multiple. Okay, here we go. So each level in is your properties of the previous thing. Like say, for example, in XAML or Razor, you could have an inner tag not be indented properly as a matter of style, and it'll still get run correctly. But here, if I did this, it's not the correct command. It's not part of the shared resources job. It becomes another job because here's the jobs, job 1, job 2.
Yeah, this is where syntax highlighting really comes in handy.
I definitely recommend VS Code for this because it recognizes when things aren't lined up correctly for YAML. For example, I get a little error there saying I don't know what that belongs to.
Yeah, so
which I do something like this.
It's got some language services built in, some linting, that type of thing to help
it does the best
not
it
make
can.
mistakes.
Yeah. It'll help you catch some really stupid ones, like silly ones, like the variable is not named the same. But one thing I do like to do is I double click on the thing that I'm expecting it to be, and I'll scroll down and look for those things to be elsewhere. So up here, the output is tag prefix. So I'm expecting that to be the same spelling down here. So it needs that value. It'll stay highlighted. So it's a good way to make sure that your spelling is correct.
And in that case right there, if you could scroll it just a little bit, is I guess those are different variables, but that makes the question come to mind, does case matter? And I guess
No.
this is okay. So case does not matter. It's not case sensitive.
For the variable names on the outside. But if you're inside a bash shell, for example, bash rules apply, right? Or PowerShell rules apply. So if you're inside that particular script.
Yeah, like file names, for example, can be case sensitive.
The simplest way you can do it is you just go run. You can put it on the same line, or you do a pipe and next line. So you do 2 and you can start here. Like in bash, I don't use my var equals 1. Right, that works for bash, but for PowerShell, I would need this. You need to define your instantiate your variable with that. But these are things you would probably know with your own scripts anyways, but there's no surprises there.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's about all I can show you in the workflow. Now, seeing this on github.com and seeing an actual run will make more sense now that we define these in the YAML. So what you can do is go up to the Actions tab at the very top, the fourth one in. We can see previous runs. So on the left side where you see all workflows, we have main and we have releases. Those are the 2 YAML files that I showed you. Main was the one where we just built it. So if you click it, you can see that run.
And then we can view the file on here as well.
Yep.
And then run workflow.
That is the, go back to the YAML file. See where it says at the top, workflow dispatch on line 4. That allows us to manually trigger it if you want or not. So we don't have to always do a push signal, but if we add workflow dispatch, we get that button. That's what's kind of cool.
Okay,
right.
cool.
I
And
would
then
say we'll probably run the release one instead of this one because the release one has the same thing. But you're in the you're in the workflow. If you go over to the left side, you see the releases one right underneath it. Yep.
right
Now
in front
this
of
is
me.
the releases workflow, and we can run that. Before we run it though, let's look at the old one. Click where it says releases, right, with the green check mark. Yeah.
Ah, nice.
Yeah. So remember how
So
we
there's
had one
yeah.
job depends on another, and the final one depends on that. GitHub does a great job of showing you these things.
And we got our different targets as well.
Yep. And if you click into one, we can see all the work that went into it. So if you do the build x64 or Windows, see all these individual things. Those are all the steps we defined in the YAML. And we can see the output of that job.
We still have a dereference of possible null in there. Somebody didn't fix the null warnings. Darn it. That would be me. Cool. So we can drill into these really like granularly in GitHub.
Yep. So now if you run it, we can see it in action. You can run it from the master branch. That's fine. We don't have a separate branch. So give it a second. The new run should show up here. If not, just refresh the page.
It says requested.
There it is. So
Oh,
yeah.
there we go. It's kicking off.
Now let's
And
watch
then-
it in real time by clicking on that part. Yep.
There we
And
go.
we can see the first one already ran. Shared resources. That was really quick. We're just creating some tags.
Just running them in parallel too.
Yep. And if you do a matrix, like I could have done that build as a matrix, and it would be the same job, but it gets run for different values. But for the purposes of today's demonstration, it's better to see them as separate jobs. Now, if you click into any of them, like build x64, we can see the individual steps being run.
Nice. So everything is working so far. And this would probably be a good area to troubleshoot from if something didn't go right.
Yep.
So you'd be able to see errors at which step they occurred in here. And I'm sure it would be a nice big red mark instead of green or yellow, right?
Yep. There are conditions where a job gets skipped and it's kind of like a gray icon. It's skipped. But if something fails, I should have left a failed job in there to see what it looks like.
And then what kind of filters do we have up here? These are different. Okay, we could see filter. We could filter by ones that failed, which branch they ran on, who processed it, filter by actor. So now it's on build Windows, but it's already finished this this set of builds here. It's published. The
An
combined
IIS build
manifest.
typically takes longer.
Okay.
But the published manifest, we can actually see that now. So if you go to the home page of this repo, on the right side, we see your packages. Oh, go back one, yeah. So you see on the right where you normally see releases, in the right column all the way on the page. You see releases, and then we see packages. We're not publishing GitHub releases, but we could. But instead, we're just publishing packages. So you can click that Power Production, and we can see the actual Docker image and instructions on how to pull it. And you can see the previous ones we ran and how many times they've been downloaded. There's your command that you can pull it. So we could run the app. If you remember correctly, the code only requires 2 variables to be passed to it: the MQTT host and the MQTT port. So we can run this container with those two values, and then the app works.
I think I have Docker. I do. If we want to try that, I can try it. Let me double check and make sure it's working. It's been a while. Starting Docker engine. Looks like I have it. So we could just go to the command line and run that, and we're good to go.
Yeah, let me just double check what you have. So open maybe Notepad. We'll construct it there first.
Okay, Notepad.
And I will pre-written this somewhere to be easier.
Oh, you're not seeing my Notepad or my command line.
Okay, yep, that's step one. Now make a new line, and we do Docker run -d for detached. Maybe we shouldn't do it detached. We'll have it run in the same thing. Yeah. Run port -p for the ports. And the first port is, I think it's 8080 colon 8080. So what this means is the left-hand side is the port that's going to be on the host. You can make it 8081 just to make it clear, the first one. Yeah. The right side is the port that's open on the container. This is predetermined by the application that you're running inside the container. We know that in the code and in the app setup, it says that it gets hosted on port 8080. So the container is going to run. The port 8080 is open. And then, yeah, don't run it yet. We have a few more things to do.
Oh.
Yep. And then on the host, you can access that through port 8081. Okay, the next thing we add is -e on the same command. The first environment variable is MQ, all in caps, MQTT_host. No, I've written this. Make this easier. I know I've shared it with you already fully written out.
Oh, you could put it in private chat.
Yeah. It's probably too far long ago though. Yeah, we'll just finish writing out. So MQTT host equals, keep them together, right? No spaces after the, yeah, there you go. And then do quotes. And I believe it is solar lance.boston. Solar.lance.boston. There's a dot after solar, yeah. And now MQT port, new variable, so -e again. And the port equals new string 1883. That's the default port that most MQTT brokers will work on. Now, the last thing is the actual name of the container. So do a space and paste in GHCR to latest. You know what we pulled, that image we pulled in the first command? You can copy it out of the same notepad.
Oh, okay. Yep. I didn't realize I had it. This up here.
Exactly. Yeah. All the way to
whole
the
thing.
end. Yep.
Yeah.
We do have the option to give it a name, but Docker will give it a random name, the container a random name if you don't give it one. But I think that should work if I remembered the host URL correctly. So run the first command, Docker pull separately, so we can make sure you pulled the latest image. And any shell will work. Nice. So we're getting the build that probably finished, what, 5 minutes ago already? So we know we got the latest copy because we're using the latest tag. And now we're going to run it. Ooh, we have a problem with the GB. So you recognize this. This looks like your standard .NET terminal output, right?
Yeah.
That's essentially what it is when it's running on Linux.
So it can't create the database file, which I thought we had it set to auto migrate and create the database for us if it didn't exist. So I'm confused.
We did.
So that should have migrated. This worked for me, so I'm not sure. Maybe you don't have write permissions.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Nothing ever works on my machine. Just in case if you've never seen the show, none of my stuff ever works. So I always get some weird error that nobody's ever seen ever in their entire life, and they're like, "Yeah, we have an entire QA process that weeds these things out." Yet somehow you
want to break it, send it to Ed.
Yeah, exactly. Lance has got it.
Okay, so I have it here. What I'll do is I'll share
sure
my terminal. My whole monitor is too wide to show it. Let me change which. Can I change it? Edit. Okay, stop screen. I'll add another one. Oh, I could have done it in VS Code, but let me know when you're seeing that.
There you go.
So you're just seeing some of my previous commands, so I didn't want to enter it. So here's the one that I give it a name, Power Hour. There's my port. There's the host. There's the other variable. And then, oh, this is my old one. Where is Ed's? I guess I never tried yours. But this is kind of the same thing. So we'll just run that. So run will automatically pull it if you don't have it locally. But if you have it locally and it's not the latest version, it won't pull the latest version for you. So if you've run this before, you should always have the practice of doing the Docker pull and then Docker run. All right, so recognize this. Yep. So the app is actually running, and if I go to localhost 8080, the app will be there.
Nice.
All right, and to stop it is Control-C. If you wanted to run it, like most things run it detached, that's when you do the -D. So that is not attached to this terminal, and I can close it. So I'm running it detached. Oh, I can't overwrite the same name. This is why I usually don't use a name on a container. But that's pretty much it. Anyone who knows Docker would have already chosen the Docker.NET image, but the .NET SDK does a wonderful job of handling most of the stuff for you. You just tell it what variables you need, and it's the same whether you targeted Windows or Docker.
And of course, like demos do not run on my box. I'm interested in trying to figure out why my SQL connection didn't spin up, but that is for another day. Like today will not be the day.
Yeah. If we go back to GitHub, go to where you are on the main page of the repository. And you can always see the packages list on the right. And you can always see any attachments. What we could do, if this was the last stage of this, I would take the Windows build and make it a GitHub release. So if you go to the actions, we were waiting for the Windows one to finish. It's the latest build. And if you scroll down, well, go back one, you can see I attached the Windows build. So under artifacts, if we download that, that is the actual application compiled to be able to run on Windows. If you download it, we can look at what's inside of it and confirm that it's a compiled ASP.NET project.
There's www root and all the DLLs.
Is the database file there? That's probably why the container failed too. So if we ran that, it's supposed to create the DB file for us. Probably why it broke last. No, that's the DLL.
No, there's no DB file, but I thought that happened when the app booted up.
For the first time, right?
Yeah. That's why I'm confused.
Well, I don't know how to run this app without IIS. Can you just run the exe directly?
Let's see what happens. It's
it's not signed.
Yeah, it's fine. Let's run it anyway.
How does it know what port to use? Because
it's a good question. Let's see what it does.
Hey, oh yeah, okay. There's the issue again. So
Whoa.
it spun up and it couldn't
fast.
create the DB.
Yeah, it crashed. Okay, so auto migrations may or may not work with published apps. They work in debug mode, but
you could probably get away with copy pasting the DB files from the debug folder of the project into the release.
Yeah, it's just interesting that like it doesn't run like maybe it doesn't have permission to create them. I think that's something you might have said earlier too. Like it tries to create it, doesn't have permission to, and then it falls flat. Because if we delete these and I run the app, it will recreate them. So maybe there's something permission-wise it's missing, that it tries to create the file, it fails to do it, and then it can't connect to it, so it blows up. But you don't get you'd think you'd get an exception on the file creation, like not working.
Right. Instead of connection exception.
Oh, let me double check something else too. So we ran it. Okay, it's there now. So maybe the second run will work.
Service lookup. Can we go back to that, or did it close the terminal right away?
Let's try open in terminal.
Oh, yeah. We never set either variable.
variables.
So how do you pass that to an exe?
Before we do this, hang on. Let's go back to the Docker thing again and try. So what I was thinking, I don't think I got a chance to explain it, was I see that the file is there now. So what I'm thinking happened is that was when I ran it local. When I ran the Docker the first time, the file wasn't there and it was creating it, and it tried to spin the app up before the file was dropped into the folder. So now it's actually there, and maybe the second time is a charm. Nope, it says unable to open database file once again. So I'm wrong on that one. Let's see. Let's go to the other command.
We can look inside the container though, and make sure the file's there. Easiest way to do this is you have Docker for desktop, right? Yeah. So go to your containers list. There you go. The one we created was that one. So if you click into exciting Rob, like inspect or exec. Exec is probably better. Yeah. So this is click the run button. Let's see if it'll stay running.
There's our list of files.
But it might be in home. I forget where it puts it. Puts it under app. Yeah, check app. There it is. Yeah. Let's see if the file's in there.
Yeah, I don't see it in here. Yeah. So this is a different issue than what's happening on the Windows version. Because the Windows version, it did create it. It just created it after the fact, and now it wants environment variables to run. And I'm assuming it would work if we supplied those. It's a console application. It should spin up, I guess, a server on its own. Let's see. So this one is running in, this is what, a Linux container? So maybe it needs some sort of permissions to be able to do what we want it to do.
Yeah, this is specifically like I have no problem creating it, but I don't know why this one is. Like I
Okay.
did not need to give the container special elevated permissions because that's the whole point of containers, that inside the container it can do whatever it wants. It has like admin rights inside the container, but not outside of it. So as long as it's trying to create files inside that app folder and not inside maybe like other. So if you collapse app, this is literally the Linux operating system home directory, right? The root
Yeah.
directory. There are some files in there that the user cannot write to, but if the app directory was set with these permissions, which .NET does, it should be able to write to any file in there.
Yeah.
Go to home for a second. Let's see what's in there. Maybe not there, but
What's
the
home?
home. It's about 4 folders down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Home
That app
app.
folder there. Okay. I'm just making sure there's not a confusion between which app. Yeah, that looks normal. There's something else to investigate here.
Okay. Well, I don't think we'll be able to solve that one. We might be able to do this real quick. So this was the Windows version. It's looking for MQTT host and does it need the other port and the port?
No, because we default to 1883 if it's missing.
So let's try. Uh, is it set X? See if this works. It's a shot in the dark, but I'm trying to do this from memory. What's the server? It's in Notepad.
Solar.lance.boston. Yeah.
Let's try that. Invalid syntax. Come on. Set X is invalid. So PowerShell. I thought setting an environment variable is set X. PowerShell is going to be. That's not it. Let's see what this
I
says.
mean, you could set the environment variable of the shell, but does that mean the exe is going to use it?
I think it will as long as I launch it from the same instance. If I were to close that terminal or open a new one, it wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, this is a simple little fix that has nothing to do with the deployment. It's just us making sure the database file is instantiated before Entity Framework tries to use it. So we'll fix that up.
It's interesting to see how it behaves a little bit differently deployed than it does in your debug environment, though.
Yeah.
Which, that's where the whole works on my machine meme comes from, is like this stuff always works on your dev box, or in my case, never works on my dev box. And then you publish stuff and things break. So it's been an interesting project to work on this summer. And Lance, special thanks to you for all the hard work you put into writing code for it. And
it's been fun
making it
too.
happen.
I'm going to write a blog post to summarize everything we did. So if anyone wants to recreate the process, they can either look at the source code or read the blog post.
Yeah.
And
thanks,
Justin,
guys, for
thanks
for
for
letting me
joining
be
us.
the fly on the wall today. So I didn't have anything to add. So
Thanks for sharing your Blazor insights with us.
Sure. It's great.
Awesome. So this is going to wrap it up for Blazor Power Hour for a little while. We'll probably have some special shows throughout the holiday seasons. But other than that, we are not going to have a regular schedule. We're not going anywhere on hiatus permanently, but three shows a week is a lot. So I'm going to step back for a little bit and get some work done. But thanks again, guys, and we will see you offline.